Hello, this is VIVAN CHRISTMAN, your host for Spotlight on Education. This morning, we're out at the Deep River Elementary School. It's a new elementary school, one of the new ones that have just been built. And I'm joined today with Phyllis Farron. Thank you for coming and being on our program.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Well, I guess really we've come to be with you in this beautiful surrounding. I understand the dedication of this school was, on Saturday?
Saturday at 2 o'clock. We had a very nice showing. It was a wonderful event, and we were really excited. It's been a long time coming. This school and this community has had this vision and dream for many, many years, and we were just happy that we could finalize it. And we had Congressman Etheridge and Superintendent Logan and school board members and local community people. So it was a wonderful day.
Well, that's terrific. Well, Phyllis, just let me introduce you a little bit to the audience at home. You're the assistant principal, as I understand it, here at the school. You have a very illustrious career in education, from what I've heard.
I don't know about that.
You been recognized as for your outstanding performance in some of your prior work, and we'll get into that a little bit as we get into it. But let's get started. Phyllis, so that the folks at home can get to know you a little bit. Talk to us about your background. Where were you? Where did you grow up as a child? And
Well, as a child, I grew up in Jonesboro, and being from Sanford, anyone would probably recognize the name Jonesboro. And I grew up in a family of 6 children, 5 boys, and I was the only girl. So a lot of lessons that I learned in life happened in that environment. I was raised, like I said, in Jonesboro. I was raised in the house that my grandfather built in 1920.
No kidding.
Yes, so it was a very, I had a very broad sense of family and where my people had come from. And I went to Jonesboro Elementary School.
Oh, did you really? The same Jonesboro Elementary School that's there now, or a different one?
Actually, it's been torn down, and it was located on Main Street, next to the Jonesboro Methodist Church, and there's a marker there kind of commemorating the building. It was a wonderful building, wonderful 2-story structure, and it was torn down many years ago, and we were moved at that point to Jonesboro Middle School, which is the current Jonesboro Elementary School. So I went to middle school there. It was like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at that time. And after I finished the middle school, I went to Sanford Central High School, which is now Lee Senior.
Wow. So all of your elementary school and primary education was here in the county?
All of my formative years were spent in Lee County, yes.
As you talk about your days there in the elementary school, I noticed in your eyes that there's a lot of strong feelings, very positive feelings about that experience. Talk to us a little bit about that. Who were some of your early childhood heroes, or perhaps classes that you loved, things like that?
Well, I love belonging to a school where I knew where I was going to be the next year. There was a sense of knowing that you would start in a certain grade and that you'd eventually work up. I had an 8th grade at the time. And having older siblings, they were in the older grades, and I knew that I'd eventually get there. But I also knew that I would have some of the same teachers that they had. And so there was a lot of motivation on my part to do well, because my brothers, if they have done well academically, as soon as you hit the classroom, they say, oh, I hope you're going to be as fine a student as your brother. And I really struggled with that a little bit, because my brothers tended to not be as animated as I was in the classroom. Something that I kind of remember about being a girl and being raised in a family of boys, when I started school, there was not the perception that I guess there was the perception that girls were supposed to behave in a certain way, and they were supposed to have certain characteristics, and I unfortunately did not fit that mold. So I struggled a little bit in elementary school with finding where I was going to fit in, coming from an environment where I was always playing with boys, and when the teacher said line up for playtime, I was in the boys' line. And I remember a 1st grade teacher asking us to draw a picture about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I drew a picture of an airplane pilot. My father had been a pilot during World War II, and I'd heard all these stories of all these missions. We had flown many missions over Germany growing up. And she told me that I couldn't be an airplane pilot. And I was
you're kidding.
I was dumbfounded, and I said, oh? And it's the first time I'd ever heard that in my life. Not that I discussed it with my parents. I don't think they knew that either. But it just kind of really, I said, well, what can I be? And she said, well, you probably will be a nurse or a teacher.
No kidding.
And,
So
and you know, I don't hold it against the dear lady. I mean, that was the culture that we were, you know, it was in the early 60s, the year, you know, John F. Kennedy was killed. And, you know, we wore dresses to school. We didn't wear pants, and dresses were another foreign thing to me. And so I remember thinking, this is going to be interesting, how I'm going to find my place in school. And as I went through the years, it really got a little bit easier, but I was always kind of an unkept child, but very good at sports and excelled in those areas. And I had a lot of leadership potential because being raised with boys, I had to pretty much fend for myself, and I just carried that with me to school. But I did have a really turning point came when I entered a fourth grade classroom. And what's really interesting about that is my fourth grade teacher is currently a teacher at Tramway Elementary School in fourth grade there.
no kidding.
Her name is Martha Quick. And Ms. Quick was her first year teaching when I entered that fourth grade classroom. And it was magical. I'm not so sure she knew exactly what she was doing being her first year, but we were so impressed that we had a young teacher right out of college. And we were in a mobile unit at the time. And I remember thinking, if I could just grow up and be like that, that would just be wonderful. So that's the first time that I think I started thinking, you know, being a teacher might not be so bad.
No kidding.
And so my life really took a turn for trying to envision myself as possibly being a teacher, because I felt like I had what it took. I was a leader. I liked to be in charge, and I was creative, and I thought that profession might actually have something for me. But she was a big influence in my wanting to be a teacher. And I've had the pleasure of working with her. My first year teaching, I worked with her at Jonesboro Elementary School.
Oh, that had to be an interesting experience to go back and were you student teaching, or
No,
this
no, it's my
first job?
Right. And so I taught with her and some other wonderful teachers from Jonesboro, and they trained me. They raised me right. And the hardest thing was not calling her Miss Quick, was calling her Martha. And what's been interesting, as I look at that relationship, every single school that I've been in Lee County, I have had someone who has taught me at the school. And now I have a student that I had taught teaching at this school, so it's kind of coming full circle. But anyway, that was a neat experience in elementary school.
That is a terrific story. What a wonderful experience, both to have, you know, a teacher like that could mark your life so substantially, and then to get to actually come back and work with her again and things like that.
She's still teaching. That's wonderful. But you know, she's one of several people who really influenced my life. When I went to middle school, I loved middle school. It was exciting. I was a wonderful. I just enjoyed being that age. And so when I decided to become a teacher, I wanted to really teach middle school, because I thought this is where it's happening. And if you've been in any middle school lately, and I've spent past 2 years in one, it's exciting. There's never a dull moment. The dynamic energy of a middle school is pretty amazing. So as I went on to Jonesboro Middle School, I had a lot of teachers who influenced my life then. And again, they encouraged me, and they did not try to stifle, you know, who I was. And so I got to develop and grow and gain a lot of self-confidence in being a good student, but also being a lot of other things, which after I got to high school, I really kind of majored in extracurricular activities rather than the academics. So,
You know, your experience that you talked about being ambitious, or I forgot the word that you used just a moment ago to describe yourself, having grown up with the brothers and such, must be a great advantage for the students who are with you today, because you can appreciate where they are a little bit more rambunctious, perhaps, than the model would say that an ideal student would be. That must be a tremendous advantage.
I guess I have not really ever thought about it that way until you just mentioned it, but that's true. I love kids that have a little bit of mischievousness about them, and that don't quite fit the norm of what a good student is. A good student to me is a lot more than a straight-A student. I like kids with personalities, with a wonderful sense of humor. They catch my jokes. Oh, they're on my team. And but also I like kids that need encouragement. That it's really quite an art to look at an entire classroom of kids and know what each one of them needs and what you can provide for them. But I really saw myself as a motivator to make them believe in themselves, that they could do anything, and to inspire them and say, you know, you can do that, and to have big dreams, and to not tell them, no, you can't be something when you want to grow up. Absolutely, you can do it. This is how we get there. And I think one thing that I used to always stress to my students is that, you know, they must have dreams, but they also, you know, hard work. They have to have a good work ethic, and they have to be committed. And the going gets tough sometimes, and that's when they have to really dig their heels in and take charge. And being a teacher gives you an opportunity to every day go in and be in front of children and motivate them and inspire them. It's an incredible experience.
Well, that's terrific. We're going to take a break here for a moment and hear a word from our sponsors. Before we do, I want to remind everyone that Spotlight on Education is brought to you by the Santley Rotary Club, where putting service above self is the motto of members in all the Rotary clubs, looking for opportunities to make our communities better. If you would like to be of service in the community and haven't found your niche, contact someone who's involved in a Rotary Club, and they may be able to give you some ideas of how you can put your talent and time to good use. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Spotlight on Education. Welcome back to Spotlight on Education. I'm VIVAN CHRISTMAN, your host, and we're at the Deep River Elementary School with Phyllis Farron today. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We were talking before the break about some of your early childhood experiences and what it was like growing up. Family of all boys. It sounds like it was a terrific experience and gave you some great preparation for what you're doing today. Talk to us a little bit more about from those early days and those experiences and the inspiration that got you thinking about education to how you got into education, your final choice to get there, and where you started.
Well, I had the, I guess, the pleasure of living in a family where education was supported and it was promoted. And my grandmother lived with us at the time, and she was a retired school teacher. Oh, okay. And she was incredibly bright and very, very articulate. And each evening I would go over to her parlor, as she called her sitting room, and we would review my entire schoolwork. And my brothers too, they did it. But I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the attention. I enjoyed the way that she would encourage me. I would be writing a paper, and she would go through and she'd say, this needs to be fixed. And she would mark it with a pencil, so I wouldn't have to redo the whole paper. But I would spend a lot of time under her tutelage. And as I talked about going into education, she was very supportive, but I could have said I wanted to work at Barnum & Bailey, and she would have been very supportive of that too, because my parents were very encouraging to all of us to do whatever we wanted to do. I have a brother who majored in art, and most parents would say, "Oh my gosh, don't do that."
You'll starve to death.
Yes, and he's doing quite well, actually. He's in commercial art, and so he's doing very well. And so being a teacher was something that was highly respected in my family. It was never something that wasn't quite good enough to be. And so I just naturally felt like that's what I wanted to do. So my senior year in high school, I started thinking about college. Unfortunately, I probably should have started thinking long before my senior year, but at that point in time, I thought, I'm supposed to be going somewhere next year, so let's check this out. And my grandmother had done work at Appalachian State, which was a very good teacher school, and then East Carolina. And I had a lot of friends that were going to East Carolina, ECTC, because it used to be a teacher's college, and that's why East Carolina Teachers College. And so I had heard really fun things about East Carolina. I thought, well, this would be an exciting place to go to school. And so I enrolled, got accepted, and started my freshman year, and immediately started pursuing an education track. So therefore, by the time I had graduated, I had, in 4 years, with no summer school, had completed what I needed to complete to get my teaching degree.
So you knew exactly where you were going.
I started that very first day. Now, I changed a little bit what I thought I would want to major in, because my courses, during my coursework, certain interests of mine started evolving. And while I was there, I chose middle grades education 4 through 9. And rather than elementary ed, I never had really wanted to work with the younger children. Not that they're not wonderful. Believe me, I have tremendous respect.
But it was all that dynamic energy you talked about that you wanted.
Yes, I wanted action, and I wanted content. I wanted to talk about world events, and I wanted to get into math problems, and really, I wanted to get into theater and show kids, how to make things come alive. So anyway, I went into middle grade education, and while I was pursuing those studies, I did a lot of work in the community in Greenville, and got exposed to several schools, a parochial school, public schools, spent time there, so I knew this is what I wanted to do. I also took my first camp position. I loved the outdoors, loved water sports, loved hiking, fishing, anything that was outdoors, and I got my first job in between the summers of my junior and senior year at a camp up near Chapel Hill. Loved it. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do with the other part of my life. Because if I'm a teacher, then I have a couple of months in the summer. And so up until the time I was married, I spent every summer outdoors in a camp. So I just went from a classroom to an outdoor classroom. And we were on rivers, or we might be rappelling. And so anyway, I got to have a year-round experience with children. But that started when I was in college. And I had a wonderful student teaching experience. And during that time, I just felt really right on track, that I was doing what God had really intended me to do. I had these tremendous gifts, and I felt much assurance that that's what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And that's a big deal. When you're in college, to know that that's what you want to do with your life, that was really good.
Well, that is terrific. I'm looking forward. We're going to take another short break here in a moment, but then we'll come back and want to talk about what your dreams are, and your goals, what you're trying to accomplish here in this position, and how you're working with the kids here at Deep River. I can see it in talking to you, the excitement as you talk about your experiences. It must be some lucky kids that get to work with you.
Oh, I hope so.
Well, we'll be back in just a moment, but before we take a break, let me tell you about another local business that's been a great friend of education, and that's Barry's Strawberries, located out on Cox Mill Road. It's about 1 mile off of 421 South, between 421 and 87. Cox Mill Road is about 2 miles south of the Walmart on 421. And you can go out there. Right now, the strawberries are just in season. I was out there on Saturday and picked a bucket. They're delicious. It's a great time. Just look for the Big Red Barn, Barry Strawberries. Stop and say hi to Barry, Michelle, or Ann Harrington. We'll be back in just a moment with more Spotlight on Education. Welcome back to Spotlight on Education. I'm VIVAN CHRISTMAN, your host. We're at Deep River Elementary today with Phyllis Farron. Welcome back. Phyllis, we were just talking about how you got into education in your college years. You're a principal now, or an assistant principal, administrator. Tell us about making that switch.
Actually, when I wanted to become a teacher, I never intended to become an administrator.
Really?
So I didn't start out saying, when I get really good, I'm going to end up being an administrator. No, not at all. My life was committed to teaching, and after 3 years of teaching, I went back to school full-time and got a master's in reading, and that was more of a commitment that I was going to stay in the classroom. I was going to teach reading. I was going to inspire kids to be literate and be successful. And after 15 years in education, I was teaching probably the best group of kids I ever had, and the state of North Carolina afforded me an opportunity that I couldn't turn down, and it was the North Carolina Principal Fellows Program. It was the first year of the program, and only 50 candidates across the state were selected. And more than wanting to be an administrator, I wanted to go back to school, and I wanted to do it full-time. I wanted to really immerse myself in the academic environment and just really pull from it what I tried to inspire kids to do. And so I had 2 young children at the time, aged 3 and 6, and my husband owns his own business, and he was committed to doing this with me, and it took a commitment because he really took over the position in the family of child care.
Sure, there's a lot of work.
3 nights a week he was there. He really had they called him Father of the Year at Chapel Hill, because in my classes we were so intimate with each other and my professors. But anyway, I received a master's of school administration after 2 years of work. But what was wonderful about that experience was not only was it was a very rigorous and academic and challenging environment, but it led me to Deep River Elementary School. I called Robert Logan and said, I need an internship. I need to go to an elementary school. What would you recommend? And he had recommended Edwards or possibly Deep River, and I had just left Edwards. I'd been there 5 years, and I said, I really know what that school's about, and I love it. It's near and dear to me, but I want a different experience. And so he connected me with Gary Moore. I'd never met Gary Moore. And Gary said, we'd love to have you come on board. And I said, Gary, what I really need from you is for you to want me to be successful. And if I have that, then I'm going to be fine. And he said, well, I can commit to that. And so I spent a year as an intern, and I worked here, and then I got my first administrative position at East Lee Middle School for the past 2 years. And then this position came open this year, and it led me to Deep River.
And you got to come back. Well, Phyllis, tell us now that you're here and you get to have some influence over what goes on, what do you focus on?
All right. Well, first let me say that Gary Moore has a school where children and staff are respected, and that's really important. And he has a shared leadership approach. I truly feel like I'm a co-principal with him, and he gives me an awful lot of responsibility, which I love because I like to take the ball and run with it. So part of what he's asked me to do is work with curriculum and instruction, go into the classroom, see what they need, talk to the teachers, find out what they're really thinking, and come back and let's talk about it, and let's get together and see what we're going to do. And we looked over our program, and we really felt like we needed to focus on reading instruction and really give kids a better basis. We know that children that are at risk need, one of the protective factors of at-risk children is that they learn to read. So we have been, if they're literate, they can rise above some really difficult situations and really succeed despite the odds, and that's what we're about. And so we put a special focus in 5th grade this year because we know once they get to the middle school, it's a different ballgame. So we've implemented some instructional strategies that we feel like are very successful, and we've gotten kids reading. You can't learn to read if you don't read. And so we have the Accelerated Reader program. And actually this week's an exciting week because some students have accumulated 100 points, AR points. They have to take tests on a computer. And Aspelia has 100 points, so she's going to get to go to the skate ranch, and she might want to say a few words about what she's been reading.
Aspelia, thanks for joining us on the program. We're just about out of time, so we've got to go quickly. So, do you like to read?
Yes, I love to read.
How many books have you read this year?
Thousands.
Lots, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Are you looking forward to going on this outing?
Well, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Sounds like you're not looking forward to that as much as you do just reading the books.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. What a wonderful model for everyone else. Well, thanks for being on our program today.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we're being joined by Chanel. Chanel, thanks for being on our program. Do you like to read?
Yes, I do.
So, what's the favorite book you've read this year?
It would have to be The Diary of Anne Frank because it's very interesting and it's like a walk through the past.
Wow, that's a pretty emotional story, isn't it?
Yes, it's very different than other books because it's actually by the person that was in the war.
Yeah, this isn't made up, is it? Well, thank you for being with us today. You have a great day and have fun at your outing.
You too.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to have these kids and to see their love for reading. We're just about out of time, but just any last comments about what you're trying to accomplish or ways others may help?
Well, I think what most people don't realize about education is that it's truly about relationships. It's about relationships between children and adults, and everyone should be learning at the same time. And that goes for the leaders as well as the parents, and it's just a wonderful profession.
I hate to cut you off. We're out of time. We want to thank everybody for joining us, and welcome back next week. Come join us again for more Spotlight on Education. Thank you.